Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. This is a little bit different intro than you normally hear, and that is simply because I am sharing a best of replay with you this week in its entirety. I didn't feel like we needed to make any changes. It seemed to be just perfect as it was originally aired the first time, but I do like to just jump in, say hi, see how you're doing, let you know that I am here with you in real time, and give you a little insight as to why I decided to share this week. We are going through some changes at work, which of course is the constant. Change is the constant, but it has led me to look more into researching the idea of change, kind of the human behavior around change. And as a quick side note, I'll be talking about this more in an upcoming episode, but I picked up the book Change Masters by Brad Stulberg. It is so good. I highly recommend it. And with that, I also was looking back at some podcasts that I had previously done, and I came upon this one, and I thought this seems to be perfect timing. So there's some changes at work with my team. There's some changes at work with some podcast episodes and a new series that I am going to be bringing to you and to folks at work, which I am super excited about. So please, let's continue the conversation. I would love to know what you have going on, maybe where change is affecting you, or maybe where you might need a little bit help of actually taking charge and making change in your life. So listen until the end. Again, Melynda is sharing some free information. And with this updated version in the notes, she has some additional courses. I will be adding a new link for you to check out as well. So please come on over to the socials at Michelle Burke Coaching. Let's continue this conversation. And without further ado, please enjoy. You are listening to the It's Your Time podcast, and I'm your host, Certified Life Coach Michelle Arnold Burke. In today's episode, I'm discussing leadership change and individual empowerment with Melynda Benlemlih. Welcome to the It's Your Time podcast, the podcast where busy professionals like you get the practical solutions and support you need to gain control of your schedule so you can strive to be the best in your career, but without the stress and overwhelm. If you're looking to increase your energy and decrease your stress, you are in the right place. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast, friends. I mentioned at the start of the new year that my intention was to bring you more strong female voices with knowledge that can help you as a complete human. And today, I have the privilege of sharing a recent conversation with Melynda Benlemlih, who is a coach, facilitator, speaker, trainer, consultant for organizations, and the founder and president of Cognitive Agility, LLC. Melynda has over 20 years of experience in organizational development in both the private and federal sectors, applying solutions across the workforce development spectrum. She has built programs in higher education, international business, and federal human capital management. And she shared so many great tips and techniques on leadership change and what you can do to feel more empowered in your role at any level. She also shared a lot of great ideas around change management, controlling your life, your time, your habits, and how to gain clarity in your life. And I love her idea of the stakeholder influencer map. She is sharing a free resource for you as well, so be sure to listen all the way through. And without further ado, take a listen. Okay, I am so excited to get started today. You have quite an extensive background. Can you maybe share with the listeners a little bit about who you help, what you do, all of the goodness that you see fit?
Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. My background is in human capital and organizational development, over 25 years. And I've done things from helping organizations set up the whole HR wheel, right? What's the job, post the job, hire for the job, train the job, get the folks in, what's their career path, professional development, all the things. So that's kind of my core background, and doing research, qualitative kind of research, focus groups and interviews to figure out what we need to train, to figure out what the next thing is in the organization. And over the years, I just started saying, give me all the people problems. Whether it's big workforce planning projects, like we're launching a new product, how many people do we need in a certain role, right? in order to make this launch happen. And over the years, I just started working more and more in the strategic planning area with the C-suite of the organization or the company, trying to figure out some of the larger issues like growth and change and mergers and acquisitions and some of those reorganizations, right? Thinking that that's going to solve whatever the problem is. And when I started doing more of the strategy and change management work, it opened my eyes to the individual and how all of these things that we're talking about are impacting people at work, because at the end of the day, that's where my heart is, and with people. And so I've worked in companies. I had my own company, went to work for a client company for a few years, back out on my own several years ago. And so I kind of seen both sides of the dynamic, right? When we make policy and we make change in organizations and how that impacts people. And so in the last few years, I just got into coaching and training and facilitation and decided that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
That's where I can have the biggest impact on people. We spend so much time at work. I think we should thrive because of each other at work, but sometimes it feels like it's in spite of each other at work.
I love that. I literally just had this conversation with a coworker yesterday because we were having some inventory issues, and we were saying, like, do the people in corporate understand what is going on? And I'm sure, like, I'm in the field, right? I'm kind of, low person, whatever you want to say on the totem pole. I don't have insight to the larger decisions that are going on. So I think that's so important what you're talking about. And is that what you mean when you say that you're a strategic human capital consultant? I love that. Like, is that for the people?
Yes. So when you have human capital folks within an organization, they're often looking at the system in an organization and how that system impacts people or how people engage with the system. So it's everything from, a job and task analysis. What is the job that we do? And then that can be used for the training that you want to develop, or the career paths that you want to develop. So it's everything around that human capital. It's a little broader than HR. HR kind of falls within that really big umbrella.
Oh, yeah, that is so interesting. And you talk about change, and I think people are often resistant to change. So, can you maybe talk a little bit about what some of the tools or the concepts are that you use with your clients to maybe help the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned just a few, but let's talk about what change is, right? There's the big capital C change that we might feel that we're impacted by, which could be a reorg or something big that's happening with the organization, right? A new product launch. It could also be at the team level. Maybe you have a new tool, a new software, a new system, maybe a new leader that wants to do things differently. That's where I kind of come in and see where people are in the middle. Like you kind of alluded to, I'm not the bottom of the totem pole, but I have folks that are depending on me. I have folks above me who are dependent on me, and I have to figure all this stuff out. Right. And so I think in that really big middle of an organization, there's a lot of change going on. And we're constantly in this, how does this impact me? Right. And what's that saying? The only thing that's constant is change.
Yes,
Right.
I was going to say that is exactly what I say about my company. The one thing that is constant is change.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, one of the first things I think we can do is identify what we can control and what we can't control. And I'm sure you've seen, or use those graphics of, here's what's in the circle, which is what I can control. Here's what's outside the circle, what I can't control. Right. And so let me just kind of pitch it out there. What can you control, Michelle?
I can control how I react to everything. I
Yeah.
think so many people, right, want to control. Listen, I try it. I try to control others, but I am never very successful. So I'll work on myself.
Right. We know. And as coaches, we know we can control our own thoughts, actually our feelings, and like you said, our actions. And then it's what can't we control? And for so many people, it's really hard to identify what we can let go of. And what we can let go of when things are changing around us are other people's thoughts, their judgments, their opinions, right? And so we really need to get clarity around what we can control. And I'll often have clients tell me, yes, but Melynda, I don't control those decisions. I don't have responsibility for that. And I see them kind of uh, deflecting authority, right? And what we need to discover is, where do we have influence? Now, we may not have control for a final decision, but I find a lot of people, especially in that middle swath in an organization, have a lot more influence than they think. So it's, what can I influence, right, out of that? When we think about what we can influence, coming from kind of an organizational systems perspective, I'm always thinking about things at the organizational level, at the team level, and at the individual level, right? And so an easy way when it gets complex like this is to just kind of draw it out. I'm a very visual person. I love speaking in metaphors. So I'll offer this tool, and that's to create, I call it a stakeholder influence map. Now, if you're familiar with project management, PMP kind of training, strategic communications, change management, we often do this exercise as one of the first things to identify, okay, what's the playing field really look like? I call it a stakeholder influence map, and it really just looks like a big bullseye. So the first thing to do, and if your listeners, if you're in a place where you can get a piece of paper out, do this exercise. If you're driving or walking, which is when I often listen to podcasts, just imagine in your mind's eye this really big bullseye. Okay. So you've got a big circle, and then you draw another circle in the center, and then you draw a smaller circle in the middle. In the middle, draw a stick figure, and that's you. And so one of the things we help clients do is identify their perspective and really lean into their role and their perspective and who are all the players, right, around on the stakeholder map. So the second step is to identify who are the people or maybe the roles that have the biggest influence on you and your day-to-day operations. So you might have a team leader, you might have a project manager, right, who influences you. You could look at this two way. Who do you influence as well? And start writing those names and those roles around you as the center. What we oftentimes forget is they also have stakeholders that they're accountable to. And so this helps us broaden our perspective. Well, who are the other stakeholders in this complex dynamic that might be influencing me, but a little more indirectly? So maybe there's a program manager or a vice president or a client if you're providing a product or service, and start to map them out on the outer rings. And this just gives us pause to reflect and identify, okay, I think I might have a little more influence here than what I first imagined. So that's a really good exercise to just, in 10 or 15 minutes, get it all out, and it starts to make sense visually for you.
Oh, I love that. I think that makes such sense and will bring such awareness, because I know sometimes I will often say, like, if only I knew what the bigger picture was, I would probably have more buy in. But instead of like taking the time to think about, like, I feel like your exercise can help give that pause to kind of look at that bigger picture, not necessarily be so dependent on others to tell me. And then I will feel more in control. And I feel like what you're saying is exactly that. Like, it's so much more empowering to know how much influence you actually do have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can share a story. I just had a client last week work through this, and I'll just kind of set up this scenario, and maybe you're familiar with it in kind of product development, sales types environments. I work a lot with software development companies who work for larger federal agencies. Okay. So they're providing a software as a service or a product. And I had a team lead reach out to me, and she said, Melynda, I'm a new team lead. I have 6 people working for me. Our client is a federal agency. And the problem is we're overrunning our budget because the client keeps changing the requirements. And I keep talking to my project manager, and they're telling me it's okay, just do what the client wants. And then I go to my program manager, and I found out that they have a longstanding relationship with the client, and I want to get in their meetings, and they say, no, we don't have the budget for you and your team to attend the meetings. Just do what the client asks. but I see that I'm overrunning. And now I don't feel like a good leader because I'm telling my team to do different things. And there's this churn and this spin, right? And so we identified what the problem was. And I'll just pause and ask you, how many stakeholders did you hear in that scenario?
Oh my gosh, it sounds like there's a lot because it's like her worker, right? If it's all around the circles, like the program manager, the other boss, the client, like yeah, multiple.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, doing this exercise, she was able to just map out, okay, I have my team, I have a project manager, I have a program manager, and I have a client. And what we identified was the dynamic of the communication, right, was going from client to her team, client to program manager. And it seemed like the client was in control. And so she had to reflect on that. And the next step after your stakeholder map, once you map it out, is really to reflect and ask yourself, okay, in this scenario, what's working well? And she said, my team is great. They'll do, we want to make the client happy. And I said, well, what do you want more of? And she said, I need to attend those meetings. I'm a technical expert. I need to be in the conversations where the requirements development is happening. And I said, well, what do you want less of? She said, feeling frustrated, going over budget, and being left out. That reflection exercise then led her to some action. And our clients can discover the best action for themselves. We give them roadmaps and tools, right? And encouragement. And she came up with her next best step, which is having a meeting with the program manager and articulating why, if she's in the meeting, they will have less burn rate on the budget because she can articulate the requirements changes with the client in the room and start to develop trust with that program manager who has the relationship with the client. And she had to kind of script out what she was going to say to pitch this to the program manager because she's new on the project and they have an existing relationship. So we scripted it out. She actually wanted to practice the conversation. She got into the meeting and now is on the pathway of influencing those decisions that the client wants.
I think that is so important. You mentioned a couple things. So the questions like, what do you want to change? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? And like, then what are the action steps I'll take? And I think even at like a rep level, if somebody's in sales, maybe not the project manager or the manager, that's important to really consider because when you can come to your leader or whoever your strategic circles are, you can come with something that is practiced in place and not just like venting, right? It just seems much more appropriate and able to actually take action on.
Absolutely.
That's so good. What do you see, because you do work with a lot of leaders, as maybe one of the biggest challenges that they have, and how do you help overcome it for them?
It's interesting that you just mentioned coming with a solution, right? Like we always hear leaders say, well, don't come to me with the problem, come to me with the solution. And sometimes we feel like, well, I don't know the solution because I don't have all the context, right? So once these activities get you into that context, you're better prepared. And we often work with the folks needing to go to the leader. My advice to the leaders, from what I've seen over just patterns of behavior and how we're humans in organizations, and so organizations aren't perfect. I have found a pattern of leaders saying, oh, I have an open door policy. Oh, just come to me and tell me, but not really setting up the dynamics that conversation feels safe for employees. So my advice to leaders more recently has been, how can you create a safe space to really listen? And what do you need to set up in your own mindset to listen to what people have to say? So for example, the open door policy traditionally is, come on in anytime, let me know. Well, you already have a power dynamic of you're in your office, right? And we've all gotten called into the office, right?
Like
And
the
that
principal's
already,
office.
right? So that doesn't really feel safe, all right? And so some leaders will say, you said this in a meeting. I was really curious. You sounded frustrated. Let's go for a coffee or let's go for a walk. So something where you can shift the power dynamic a little bit to create an opportunity for someone to open up. And there are a lot of tips and techniques to create that dynamic, but the self-awareness of leaders, I think, is really important. And we have labels, right, that we put on ourselves and that we put on others. And oftentimes I deal with senior leaders who um, think that they're just showing up as the person. Mary Jane says, so how was your weekend? What did you think about this? But the employees are still looking at you as Mary Jane with the vice president hat on. So it takes some level of self-awareness of the authority that you carry with you just by nature of your title.
Oh,
And
that's
then we have labels of ethnicity and race and gender and age, right? And I do some unconscious bias training in DEI work, and I find that this is a thread that hits so many elements in organizations, is that self-awareness of how we show up and how others perceive us. So I think it's really important for leaders to kind of pause and look at what those dynamics are that they're bringing in, and how might they create an opportunity to really hear the hard truths.
Oh, that is so good. I was just talking to a colleague earlier this week, and she was talking about how in their meetings, she's able to talk, but she rarely feels like anybody listens to her. Like they don't take her feedback as far as messaging. And it's just interesting to that point. Like, how can we listen better? And also the self awareness, right? Because my guess is the leaders probably think like we're giving her a chance to talk. And that's what they are, but they're not listening.
Right. And don't you know, in communications, I think we're all guilty of this. We judge our own abilities in communication based off our intention behind the communication, but we judge others' communications based on their behavior. And so the blind spot that we might have is we're not really assessing our behavior. We're blinded by, but I meant well, my intention is there, but my delivery might have a different impact. And that's the gap where we need to help people understand their delivery and the perception of others. And that's all about self-awareness.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yes, intention versus behavior when it's the oh gosh, yes, that was definitely a good reminder.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And we are both passionate about gaining clarity. And I think a lot of times, especially in this job, it's this like busy badge of honor that people are just always going, going, going. So, can you maybe talk a little bit about why it's important for us to have clarity on our lives and maybe any tools if you can share?
Sure. So one of the things I love to remind people is don't believe everything you think. Right? We create these stories, we tell ourselves stories about circumstances, and we often pause and have to say, is that true? Right? And one of the activities to do that is, what I call the brain dump. Right. And I don't know if you have a journaling habit or don't like to journal. Give yourself a text message, whatever method to get what's in your head out so that you can see what you are thinking. Right.
And it
And
can
one
be
of the
frightening sometimes.
Absolutely. And I think that's why a lot of people are hesitant to journal, is because they're afraid of what they're going to see. Right. And so we need to coach folks to understand that that's just the unconscious brain doing its job. It's okay. Right. The judgment and the shame and the guilt and all those things, those are the feelings we might be afraid of to even start getting this out on paper. So working with a coach can give you a safe place to go ahead and examine what's out there. And what we often do, and I think you do this too, Michelle, is challenge the client to ask themselves, is this true? What in all of that is true? And what is it that we can help shift your thinking about so that you can feel some relief and gain some clarity about what's really going on? So journaling is a great tool. I have a reflection exercise, a free mini course with a workbook. So it's a little more guided exercises and prompts for people to just get into this habit.
Oh, perfect. We'll put the link in the notes for that too. And I think
Awesome.
to your point, don't believe everything you think. And the way you get the relief is by seeing it. Like, even though you don't want to put it out on paper or journal it because you're afraid of what's in there, it's still in there. Like, that is why you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed or stressed or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And when you realize that you actually can control the stories going on in your brain, and you can shift over into the conscious part of the brain where you're going to say, no, I think I'm going to pick a thought that serves me better. You have the power.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest changes when I started coaching was I always thought my story was I have no control over my time because I don't know my schedule until the day before and then it changes day of and I have no control over my time. And I fought for that story through coach after coach.
Right.
And finally, I really saw the importance of planning and being able to implement new habits. And I know that's a big thing for you too. Can you maybe talk a little bit about
Yeah.
both of those topics?
Absolutely, absolutely. Before kind of developing the habit of habit tracking, I think it's important to get to that new thought. So, if I could ask you when you shifted in the storytelling from I can't control my time, was there a thought or how did you shift that story? What's the thought that you were like, no, 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 that doesn't work for me. I'm going to tell myself something better?
Yeah, finally, what happened was a coach said to me, "Stop saying you don't have control of your time. You could actually leave your job." And it was just like, "Oh, right. The control is that I'm already doing what she's suggesting. I just didn't see it because she said if you have, if something is delayed, you bring extra work or you." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, well that's what I do." And she's like, "Then you have control over your time." So I was like, "You're right." And for me, because I know not for all of the things that I get coached on, and it felt like in that moment, it was just a snap of the fingers, but it took me how long to get there, right? But then it was like,
Yes.
"Oh, I'm totally in control of my time."
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great spot to get to. And oftentimes, where we feel overwhelmed and burnout is because we're not spending time on the things that really matter to us, right? It's that Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants time management. There's one that's it's important to me, but it might not be urgent. So I never get around to it, right? Your self care, your strategic planning, your goal setting, all of those things, we can feel that they're missing if they don't show up in our calendar every week. And so identifying habits that maybe come out of quadrant 2 or maybe even help um, with your team. It could be something as simple as I had a client say, she wants to check in with her team once a week and start having these team meetings. And I said, put it on the habit tracker. Meet with team for 1 hour. And what if you just started it 3 times a week or 3 weeks a month or 2 weeks a month? Don't make it hard, make it easy.
Yeah.
There are a lot of self-care habits where if we can just identify something small, right? I'm standing up at my desk right now talking to you. Right. One of my habits is that I need to use my standing desk for 30 minutes a day,
Oh,
right?
fun.
As small as we can make them, the better, right? I know you and I both love James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, right?
Love,
Let's make
love.
them small and easy. And when we tell ourselves, well, that's not going to make a difference, good. That's the level we want to start.
100%.
And then track them. And the reason I created a habit tracker for 4 habits over a month is so that I love checking off the boxes. I will make a list just so that I can check off that I did it, right? So I love the dopamine hits of
Yep.
a habit tracker and give your brain some data that you actually can do these things. So when that voice starts kicking up the story, you can say, no, that's not true.
Yes, that I think is so important for a few things to challenge our brain to see what it is that we have done, because it's so easy for us to tell ourselves that we haven't done that. And the self care piece, I feel like I say this all the time because I think as females, also, we're always like going, 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 and we think self care is selfish or it has to be something more grandiose, but it can literally just be your activity of dumping your brain and listening to how you talk to yourself and changing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can find the right ones that feel doable and uh, help our clients achieve success in those areas. And then they build the confidence to maybe do a little bit more.
And I think what you're talking about starting small is also so important because you're right. I think a lot of people think it's all or nothing, and then we do nothing. Like,
Yeah.
no, just get started. Even Darren Hardy talks about this in the compound effect. Like, as we go,
Yes.
Or if you have, I was just doing a Peloton workout and they're talking about keystone habits, and find the one habit that will then have the ripple effect on other areas of your life. So maybe it is exercise, and then you show up more patient for your kids or your partner, whatever that looks like for you.
Right. It's what's that phrase? The rising tide lifts many boats, right? Like, let's narrow it in, right? We're all really busy. We work with high performers, right? High achievers, overachievers. So it's hard to get folks to just narrow down, right, to just one thing, and that feels like it's enough. But if we
Yes.
can leverage what that one thing is, to your point, it can, be the tide that lifts many boats.
Oh, I love that. So good. We've hit on so many things. Have we missed anything?
Oh gosh, I'm just really curious about, the people that you serve, and what you found effective in the sales game. I work with a lot of folks in business development and growth, and I myself, I'll just share a personal story about being in a private company where I was responsible for growth and business development, and it's never ending. It was one of the reasons I quit and went out on my own. I might as well be doing it for myself. That's a whole other story. But what are some of the dynamics and maybe tips that you found for folks who are in any kind of position where it just feels like it's never ending?
Yes. And it's perfect timing because we just closed our quarter yesterday. And so I was on a call and someone was like, I'm feeling the pressure of the quarter. I'm like, oh, it's not the pressure of the quarter. It's like the pressure we put on ourselves, right? Because a lot of the clients I end up working with are the ones that wear the busy badge of honor. Like I have been that person too. So I'm not, that's just the way it often is. And will often always be going, and doing everything to try to get the sale or make the sale, helping others. So in my particular field, we work with patients, doctors, accounts, like it's very matrix oriented. But to be able to plan your time strategically and really look at what is actually important, because in the moment everything feels urgent and
Yes.
important, and then nothing gets done, and that's why we feel so overwhelmed. So it's like taking back that control of being
Love
able to
that.
do so much of what you talked about today.
Love that. That's really important. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. And I also think sometimes in sales, and this might be like a little bit of another rabbit hole or whatever, but that a lot of the women I work with tie their self-worth to the number. And that can be weight loss
Of
too,
course.
right? Like self-worth
Of
and
course.
numbers and weight loss. But it's really being able to see, if you take the time to reflect back and to look at what you have done, that it's enough, that it does not mean, like, you determine your success and what that looks like.
That's wonderful. Absolutely.
And how can people find you? We'll put the link in for the reflection guide.
Thank you. Yes. So everything's available on my website. My company name is Cognitive Agility LLC.com. Everything's there. My main social is on LinkedIn, and you can find everything there as well.
Yeah, you share a lot of great information there on LinkedIn.
I see you. I see you out there. That's our space.
That's right. Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation.
Oh, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Wasn't that great? I love the idea of the stakeholder influencer map to just allow you to take a pause, to see the big picture, and then decide what the next best decision is for you. Be sure to check Melynda out. The course link is in the notes, but again, it's www.cognitiveagility.com/clarity course. And hey, please share this podcast and tag me at Michelle Burt Coaching so we can hear how it helps you. Okay, that's what I have for you today. Take what works, leave what doesn't, and tune in next week for another opportunity to transform your life. Make it a great day. Take care. Did you know you can take this work to a deeper level with me one-on-one? Go to michelleburtcoaching.com and click on Get Started to begin.